So, how do you develop willpower, right? You have goals, you have things you want to achieve, or things you just simply want to get done to function in everyday life, but you don't seem to have the energy or motivation to do them. This is something I struggled with for my entire life, up until I was probably 23 or 24. I'm 29 now, right? When I was a kid, um, especially when I was in high school and college too, I was the biggest procrastinator. I had no willpower to do anything really meaningful. Like I was always chasing just pleasure, and pleasure in like terms of like hanging out with people, smoking weed, playing games, um, just like anything that was easy. That's what I did. And then I think after I graduated college, I went through a very, what's it called? A very traumatic, not, yeah, well, it was traumatic, but like a very hard breakup, right? And that helped me reflect a lot on my life and, what I was doing to myself, my health, right? Like I had gained a lot of weight, I had bad habits, and it was a shock that I needed to like reassess. And that's when I started to develop willpower, right? So, like I said, before that, I was the biggest procrastinator. I had no willpower. I would put everything off until like the very last minute. Like I was turning in papers at 11:59, or I was turning in homework 1 or 2 days late. Like I was just scraping by. Um, and I never would have thought, like now my willpower is insane. I never would have thought back then when I was teenager, early 20s, that I would have this level of willpower that I have now. Like now, my daily routine is kind of insane. It's just like one thing after the next. And some of those things are geared towards health and wellness, right? Like good health habits. Some of them are geared towards like personal development in terms of like music, guitar playing, singing, um, learning things like for my career, like my day job. Um, uh, yeah, and the health and wellness stuff is like stretching, taking certain supplements, red light therapy, like doing all of these things, and I do it very ordered, structured way. So, how did I develop willpower? The thing is, I did it accidentally. It started with me being extremely, like depressed and messed up, and kind of just picking one thing and making that one thing a habit, right? So I can't really recall right now what was my first thing, but I think it was probably running, right? I like to run. Like when I was in high school, I ran a little bit. I liked it. I liked the feeling of running. It was like peaceful, right? So I remember this like during and slash after COVID, I started running every single day. So kind of what I did to myself accidentally was that like as long as I ran, right, every day, it didn't really matter what else I did. Like I didn't try to make myself feel like a failure for not doing all these, 1,000 things that I wanted to do. As long as I ran, like my day was like satiated. Like my day, my quota was reached, and I could have some type of like self-contentment, right? I could like calm the inner turmoil. So when I thought about this recently because since then I've kind of just like scaled up my willpower and my level to create habits and my level to create order and discipline in my life. And I realized, how would I teach someone to do what I have done? What I figured out accidentally, because I didn't read any courses or like, you know, any books about discipline or procrastination or willpower. I kind of discovered it accidentally. What I would do now is the following, right? Say, let's take the worst case scenario, right? Like you're severely depressed and um, you're like bed rotting, right? You're in your bed, you can't get up, you don't have the motivation to get up, um, you don't want to do anything, and you're just laying in bed because you feel so, so much turmoil inside, which I have felt before. I've been in that position. Willpower is a muscle, right? Like any other muscle, whether it's your bicep or, yeah, you get what I'm saying. It's a muscle. The thing with muscles is, you know, if they aren't used, or if they've never been used, they're not that strong, right? They can do very little work, right? When if sure a lot of you have worked out before or done some type of physical activity. The first time you try to do something, it's very uncoordinated, right? And you can't do it for very long, right? Like try going on a 10-mile walk when you never walk. It's going to be hard, and then afterwards you're going to feel so sore, and maybe you'll sleep for 2 days, right? Because you used all this energy. Willpower is a psychic muscle, right? It lives somewhere in our heads, our beings, and our spirits, or whatever. It's a psychic muscle, and therefore it has a certain amount of strength to it, and it has a certain amount of energy, right? Its container, its energy supply is limited. But the thing with that, like any other muscle, is that it can be grown, you can make it stronger, and you can also increase the amount of energy that it has stored, right? How would you do that if you were in the worst case scenario? So let's say you're bedridden, bed rotting. What I would do, right, is if you're bed rotting and you're so depressed you can't do anything, what I would do is sit up, right? Sit up. Make a deal with yourself and say, you know what? Every hour, I'm going to sit up straight, and I'm going to hold that for 10 seconds, and then I can go back to bed rotting. And make a deal with yourself, because this is how you get rid of the anxiety and guilt and shame and everything. Make a deal with yourself. As long as I sit up every hour, you can play with like the deal is you make with yourself. As long as I sit up every hour, as long as I do this with this certain frequency, my quota for the day is reached, and I can forgive myself, right? Make a deal. I can forgive myself, and that day was not a waste. I did something. And what you'll notice as you do this exercise, I sit up every hour, or I sit up every time I get a text, or every time I feel the urge to look at my phone, I sit up, right? Is that after a day or two, your willpower will have increased, right? It's like you tore that little willpower muscle, and it grew back, and it grew back stronger, and the energy behind it increased, right? And then you could say, okay, well, you know what? Um, you can find some trigger to like that triggers you to do the action, but it could just be like, okay, every hour, um, I'm going to walk down the hall of my house, and I'm going to walk back to my bed and then stay in my bed and bed rot, right? And you do that for 1 or 2 days, your willpower muscle will increase, right? Because the problem is when you go online and you start looking at, like videos on this stuff, or people trying to give advice on this, when you become so embodied in having will, in having strength, um, you forget what it's like to be that person that's bed rotting, right? You forget what it's like for them, their perspective. So you start giving them all this advice that is so out of touch with them, because you're already in a different world, using different language, different ideas that they don't have because they're in that state, right? So they're trying to basically give you advice that shoots you up, but that's not how you make real progress. To make real progress, you have to do like these incremental baby steps, and then you get momentum and it kind of starts snowballing, right? So that's why what I'm saying is you need to do the most things that you think, oh my God, like that's not really a workout for my will. Yes, it is. It is a workout for your will, right? Then you go down the hall and you walk back. You do that every hour. After 2 days, you have a little more willpower. And then maybe say, well, you know what? Every morning now, I'm going to cook 1 egg for myself for breakfast. And you do that for 2 days, and all of a sudden you have more willpower, and you're like, oh, okay, okay. Okay. Once you build up enough willpower, then you can start to try to create habits. Because the whole thing with a structured and disciplined life is that if you try to adopt all of these different like things or habits at once, right? You're going to feel overwhelmed. You don't have enough willpower to go around to all of them, right? And then you're going to get depressed. You're going to feel shame and guilt because you didn't do them, and then you're going to bed rot again, and woe is me, and I hate myself, right? The whole idea with discipline is that we are stacking, right? It's like a skill tree in a video game. We are stacking. So what happens is, say you have that habit. Now you started with the egg. Now I'm going to make an egg every morning. You do that for a month. Now that making yourself breakfast every morning, making that 1 egg becomes a habit. And when things become habits, right, they don't occupy the same amount of energy and or willpower, right, that new things do. So like if you have a habit to make eggs every morning, it gets to the point where you don't think about it, you just do it, and it doesn't require that much energy because it's become a part of your system, right? It's like already integrated, right? So when we're trying to create habits and discipline, that's what we must do is you have to take your time, do not rush the process. And you start one habit, you master that habit, the habit becomes a part of who you are, therefore it doesn't take energy anymore, right? Because right now your habit is that you like speaking negatively to yourself. You like to say mean things to yourself, right? And you like to live in negative emotion. And that has become your habit, right? But also because it has become your habit, it doesn't require that much energy. That's why you're able to lay in bed for hours and just think negatively about yourself forever. Thoughts require energy, literally, physically, they require energy. But because it's become such a habit, right? It doesn't require as much energy as one of these new things, and you can just lay in bed all day and use that energy, right? So we're trying to do new habits. So I'm not even going to speak about mental habits yet, but just the physical portion, because I think it's good to start with the body. You start this one thing, maybe it takes you a month to make it a habit, but that's like your willpower task for the day. And you can go to bed at the end of the night being like, I did my task. I had one task, I did it. That today was a win. Eventually, that's a habit. Then you start new habits. Say, well, you know what I also want to do? In the afternoon or right after breakfast, once I eat, I want to go on a 10-minute walk. The egg is already a habit. You don't have to think about it. Now it's the 10-minute walk. All right, 10-minute walk. You go outside and you do that. As long as you do that 10-minute walk, that day was a win because the egg, you don't have to think about it anymore. That's just part of your lifestyle. You don't have to think about it anymore. You're doing one thing, the 10-minute walk, right? And then after a month of that, that's a part of your lifestyle. It's just egg and walk. I like walking. It's fun. It feels good. You start stacking your habits like that, and then you start to build willpower. Then eventually, after that process of creating new things, new things, new things, you'll realize I have a routine that takes up the whole day, but I enjoy it and it fulfills me. And then in the future, say you want to complete some new tasks, yeah, maybe you will be able to tackle three new habits at the same time. Because you have the bandwidth for that. You have the ability, you have the energy, you have the muscle power to do that all at once. And then imagine how crazy your life will look in a year or 2 years or 5 years of just stacking these habits, right? And it'll become so complex in a good way that you'll be able to like shift certain habits over. Like this week I'm doing these habits, and then next week I'm doing these habits. Because I know a lot of people are like, oh, I don't have the energy to do anything, and it's so hard for me to keep a routine because you're trying to do too many things at once. You have too many things in your head. You need to pick one thing and do that. And if the things in your head are, moving around too much and too stressful, get them down on a piece of paper, like make a huge list of all the things so that you can see them on the paper, right? Because when you see them, they become more concrete and they don't just run around each other or circling in and out and like, just like a mess. It's disorganized. Put them on a paper. Now they exist on the paper. They're there. You can look at them when you need to, but they're not in your head anymore. But that's what I would do to develop willpower. And the reason it's important is because once you have willpower, there's nothing you can't do. You can force yourself to do anything, even things that suck, right? Or things that are painful or things that are just arduous, right? But like there's something good on the other end of it. You can just force yourself to do it. And yeah, you're going to be like, oh man, this sucks. But you have the power to make yourself do it, and then you get the benefit at the end, right? That's the power of will. Will, I think, the best skill you can learn because everything comes from it. Like, yeah, organization and I don't know, quick-wittedness, all these other things are just like at the end of the day, what comes down to is will. Once you have will, you can force yourself to learn any skill. You can force yourself to get better at anything, right? As long as you have willpower, you can become a jack of all trades and a master of all of them. Like there's nothing holding you back from that because you simply do it because you have the power and the force of your being to complete those things. So for those of you who are struggling with willpower, think of it like that. Motivation is a lie. Sometimes we get motivation and it can help us, but we can't rely on motivation. Motivation is like a temporary thing. Oh, I watch a cool video. All right, I want to do this. But then the next day, I didn't watch that video, so I don't want to do it. We want habits. We want habits. So try that out. Let me know in the comments if it works. One thing at a time. How does the ant eat the elephant? A little bit at a time, right? Little by little. So anyway, thanks.